When we're talking about technology, I still say start with the CMMS, but even before that, start with just the basics.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. And today I'm joined by a very special guest and a recurring guest, a guest who's been on many times, but not for a while now. I can't remember the last episode we did, but it was way too long ago. So I'm really delighted to invite back and my colleague all the way over in Brightly and Corey Dickens. Welcome, Corey.
Thanks for having me on again. It has been a little bit. It's been a lot of changes for both of us during that time, huh?
Yeah. No, exactly. Lots changed. By side, we could maybe touch on that as well. But I guess to start with, Corey, it might be good just a reminder for people who may not remember you. Some may remember you, but the people who don't, what is your role at Brightly? And maybe an overview of Brightly as well, just as a reminder for people.
Yeah. So I guess the elevator pitch on my background started out in the Navy, straight out of high school. I did that for a little bit. I'm actually still in the reserves, about to wrap that career up. Spent a little bit of time in manufacturing. Again, for 12 years, turned a wrench. Either was the maintainer and the manager, or just the direct supervisor for maintenance activities. Used a few CMMSs myself, and actually liked Brightly, their primary product. They have a few products. Brightly's primary product is a CMMS. I implemented it at a textile facility. Used it for a little bit, but as things go, leadership turnover happens, the market dynamics change. You personally have an ambition or a desire for something else. So I sought out another opportunity, never realizing that opportunity would land me at Brightly, where for the past 4 years, I've been kind of a technical resource and expert for the sales team. So again, if you do a demo of our products for manufacturing clients, I'm on those calls. Behind the scenes, since we've talked, I've gotten more involved with being used for the product team or the technology team, internal strategy as a company, or just acting as kind of an internal SME for what our clients go through, their challenges, and what can we actually do to help them.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, that's a very good summary as well. And you did just remind me as well about, I don't know if it was our first episode together or a later one, but we actually did a really cool episode about your military background and how you brought some of that into your role today, which again, people go back into the archives. Maybe we can link to it in the show notes and things like that. But please listen to that episode as well. Really, really interesting. And it's a bit of a beefier episode, I'm going to call it, because it's probably about an hour and a half as well. So if you've got the time to listen to it, but it is really fascinating. So I highly recommend it. But today we are talking about, we're bringing the two worlds of Brightly and Senseye together, which of course naturally overlap with CMMS and predictive maintenance. But we're actually going to talk about some of the common challenges between that sort of integration and what's a very important integration from both sides. I could only speak from the sort of predictive maintenance side, but maybe we could start with that. Why is it important to integrate those two from your perspective, Corey?
It's a great question, and I think it's just when we talk about predictive maintenance, right? I have been trained on the core 5+1, the legacy PDM technologies, right? The oil analysis, nowadays you have RDI pioneering the motion amplification, which if you haven't seen is really cool technology. But at the same time, for the legacy period, you've used the CMMS to drive a daily round work order generated, and you'll have these technicians that walk around with these handheld devices taking measurements of different equipment to gather their vibration data. So they'll do a sample, right? They'll bring it back. They'll run it through like an SPC module or different software, right? If it even gets used. The issue is we know about a lot of preventive maintenance programs over the last 60 years. 40 to 60% of them add zero value. People just go through the motions because it's a checkbox. They don't use the data for insights, right? To figure out what's happening with the equipment. I think what Senseye does and the rest of kind of the predictive maintenance or predictive solution market is doing is reducing kind of that unnecessary waste, letting you focus on critical assets that people don't want to take offline and allow maintainers access to manage, like again, in highly critical industries like automotive, right? We know downtime costs what, like $20,000 a minute or something like that. They don't, maintenance is not optional, but it's also like, how much risk are we willing to assume? So you allow them insight to say, we actually do it when it's needed versus we just do it once a month just because that's the way we've always done it. Integrating them allows the maintenance team and the reliability engineers to leverage kind of one, I guess, bubble of solutions that talk to each other versus a CMMS admin who has to be the bridge that moves data back and forth between these solutions. So I think it's streamlining it for the end user. That's the biggest thing, is don't add to the number of applications they have to log into, reduce the amount of times they have to context switch. And at the end of the day, the CMMS here, and this is maybe something a little bit more in depth, the value of the CMMS is the historical data, right? I'm not necessarily worried about like, oh, this work order is emergent and needs to be done now. That's actually the case that Senseye is generating. It's saying, this is what we see, you should go do this. When you document it with context, it trains the attention engine, but more importantly, we store that against the asset throughout its life cycle. And the purpose long-term is to use that data to change the design requirements of the next asset if we expand capacity, or we replace the asset at the end of its useful life, or to measure which asset is our problem child. So that's the value to me. And maybe that's the whole episode and we just wrap up there. I don't know.
Yeah. Done. Summarized.
Done.
Wow, what was it? 5 minutes? Yeah, we did quite well there.
Hey, be good, be quick, be gone.
Very efficient. But I mean, maybe to expand on it, I mean, that phrase of, I've written it down as well. So the way we've always done it, and it's always, when you talk to different organizations in different states of maturity, that's always often that comes up. So I guess how do organizations, because there'll be some people within an organization maybe pushing this more than others, and how do you sort of manage those very differing viewpoints, I guess, within an organization?
I don't know if I know it's definitely it's a fear that a lot of companies have right now, which is that the old heads, which are typically the most resistant to change, and there's a reason. They've been around for 40 years. I promise you, people have tried to implement new change multiple times over that 40 years, right? So they've become callous or abrasive towards change because, oh, here we go again. A new process engineer has this great idea and we're going to try this thing and it's not going to work and we're just going to go back to doing it the way we always have. But they have a wealth of knowledge. And we're not doing a good job today of tackling that, of like tracking that somewhere for tribal knowledge. I think you and I also spoke about that, I think on our second go round. But at the same time, it's always to what's in it for me. Like if you push these corporate objectives or projects down from the top down, which usually where predictive maintenance comes from. Again, a lot of your competitors have a reputation for going into a boardroom, getting buy-in, and then boxes start showing up at the facility. And the maintenance manager gets an email that says, hey, start implementing this project. Versus with the CMMS, we're taking the opposite approach. We start with the maintenance manager and the technicians and say, all right, let's do this really well because we know your ERP, EAM bolt-on does not do this well. So it's all about what's in it for them. How's it going to what's it going to remove from their plate that they don't like doing regardless? Managing change is difficult. I would say most organizations, whether they realize it or not, are implementing a lot of change almost on a daily basis. It's just not a big change, right? It's like a micro change. It's very, very minimal. But you got to start small, and it can't always be with like, all right, we're going to go from nothing to this predictive solution, right? You got to stair step it a little bit. But you got to build a team. That's the biggest thing I see that fails with the change management of these projects, even for organizations that seem primed, is a cross-functional team between corporate resources, executive sponsorship, and then plant leadership. Like everybody thinks this stuff is a good idea. No one actually likes to follow through on it is the problem. So we need a bunch of those people that just, they want to get it done and their focus is on it. They have the right incentives in place. Again, like in my role with Brightly, my primary focus is pre-sales, and a secondary focus is on internal kind of advocacy and support. But at the end of the day, if two meetings overlap, I have to choose the primary objective of my role, right? Mm-hmm. Same thing with a maintenance manager or reliability engineer. What is their primary focus? Is this still their focus, is to keep the plant running, or is it to implement this predictive solution? You would think they go hand in hand. But again, today the pressure is just get the equipment back up and running. And then one day goes by, a week goes by, a month goes by. They're not seeing value from it. It wasn't implemented correctly. No one took ownership of it. And then they get stuck in pilot purgatory.
Yeah, and I guess another thing that can feed into that sometimes from experience as well is, we talk to many companies and they're like, oh yeah, great, no, we really want to do something predictive maintenance. And now especially it's, you mentioned AI or Gen AI. Yeah, no, we definitely, we've got budget for that. Let's give it to this, it's a project. So let's give it to our new intern and just let them sit in the corner over there and have a play with this cool new toy and see what happens. And then funnily enough, there's no value. There's no stakeholder buy-in. Is that still quite a common thread?
I would say so. Not just the interns.
Not hitting on interns, by the way. Not having a go.
No.
Should say that
they are valuable. It's a good experience for them. They need something to do because, again, like you're not going to give them something that's a high-risk project. You're not going to have them obviously going out there and doing their own PMs. They're not trained for that. That's not what they signed up for this for. But I still think we see that. It's not just interns, though. It's internal resources. We just add responsibilities to the plate. We don't clearly define, like, hey, what is shifting off of my plate? We just expect you to take more. I mean, we see it everywhere, right? Everyone's lean, right? They're doing more with less than they ever have. The maintenance group, their day-to-day workflow, they're doing more than they ever have with fewer people. So they get buried in it. They don't understand, hey, taking the time to document these things, track how many hours I'm doing, create the corrective work orders for all the little knick-knack stuff that I fix throughout the day can actually help me. And then, so because we don't do that, we put in faulty data or half missing data. A planner somewhere has to populate this Power BI report. So they're filling in the data based on guesswork, and the reliability engineer is making assumptions off of that, half-truth data. And then that's driving their assumptions of where to apply predictive technologies. And then it gets to the technician and they're like, why did y'all choose this equipment? I know which one you should have done this to.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, and that's a clear example of when you don't bring these stakeholders together. There's usually a key component or a key viewpoint that's often missing. And all these, it's like a jigsaw. I mean, maybe compare it to a jigsaw puzzle. You need all the pieces to fit together in order to, for a smooth rollout. And one of those pieces is missing, and you end up being a bit disappointed that you haven't completed the jigsaw. Mate, I don't know whether that works as an analogy. I've never used it before.
It could. It just, again, like you don't do a multi-thousand piece puzzle for your first puzzle, right? You choose a small one that's pretty simple. And you figure out the pattern. You do the pattern recognition. You figure out how it works. And if more people want to come play, then y'all can work together. But you have to figure out how you work together and take advantages of your strengths and weaknesses. So again, like the predictive maintenance thing is still one of those like IoT analytics corporate buzzwords talked about during earnings calls, right? Mm-hmm. And that came from one of the big consulting companies, found out that downtime was one of those like big hooks in these executive presentations, like the fear of downtime. So they kind of did some fear mongering there. And then this new technology came around and they're like, oh, it can eliminate your downtime, right? And it's like, that's also a half truth. It can definitely prevent a lot of it, but you have to be able to manage the maintenance and identify and do risk and get the parts in place and then execute the work. And I know you see this with the Senseye side. It's like the alerts are great, but you have to act on them. And we have to have a mechanism to prioritize them because we already have work committed for the week. So now this is breaking in. What does it move? And how do we justify that? And how do we measure it and track that? But the puzzle piece, I think it could work. Again, that's where I say, like, don't start this project with a 1,000-piece puzzle. Start with like my kid's 10-piece puzzle, right? And it's a simple picture of a dinosaur, and it's like a 3x4 is the puzzle. Start there, get some wins, figure out how the team works together, and then scale it. Unfortunately, this is just one of those buzzwords that is preached at these board level meetings. Someone has a friend that has a reputation or has experience or a mutual connection on LinkedIn with one of these sensor or these predictive maintenance solution providers, and they're like, "Oh, let's try them." And then it just shows up on the plate of a maintenance manager. And I say this because I was at the Reliable Plant conference. What was that? A month and a half ago now. So like SMRP over here in the States has become kind of like, it's a CMMS EAM show, right? Like half the exhibitors are all like CMMS or EAM consultant groups. Reliable Plant started out as like the oil analysis and the lubrication excellence, and has morphed into this like sensor provider show. Like I'm not joking when I say 3/4 of the exhibitors at that show had their own branded wireless sensors, right? So you have price points from, let's say, $30 a sensor, price points up to over $100 a sensor, right? On a monthly subscription fee. And everything in between. You have some systems that have human in the loop, and you have some systems without human in the loop. So again, this in the CMMS market, Paula Chance is a good friend and former founder of now what is Brightly's kind of main CMMS, Asset Essentials. He's talked about for a long time, the CMMS market has undergone this homogenization, right? Where everything is just average. Everything's standard. All these features are standard. So now it becomes like, who's the cheapest? I fear that the PDM market is doing the same thing, right? If you're a wireless sensor provider or a predictive analytics platform that consumes condition monitoring data, everyone probably thinks y'all all are the same, and they have a hard time differentiating and understanding the unique value propositions of each, which is an issue because then I feel bad for the people buying because they go at that show and they're just inundated and they don't know the differences between it, right? So for example, I have a buddy out on the West Coast here. Same thing happened. Someone knew someone. Boxes started showing up at his facility, and they said, all right, an engineer from this company is going to be out and they're going to help start installing this stuff. So they went through it. They weren't against it, but they didn't set the minimum technical requirements. Honestly, he admitted like they didn't know a ton about this technology, so they didn't know what to ask. They didn't know the right questions. They went through a pilot. It did not go well. They returned those sensors and stopped that service. And then they used that lesson. So here's the point. This is an inflection point for many people, right? A lot of people may become abrasive to PDM technologies at this point because, again, they think, well, this one is the same as that one. So if this one didn't work, that one can't work. Instead, they took a different approach where they said, hey, let's learn from our lessons here. And let's go back to the market and actually try and see if there's something that fits our needs, our preferences, our needs for our market. So they went back out there and they found something. It actually happened to be cheaper and it's more applicable to their application and it's working for them. And now they're going to start to try and scale that across like facilities with similar processes.
Yeah, and I think Corey, that's a really good explanation of the current market, and speaking from the PDM side, it's I can see how confusing it is for people because everything has been labelled as AI or predictive maintenance. When I started at Senseye, or pre-acquisition, 4 years ago, predictive maintenance was still sort of a growing term. It was something that was under the radar, but now you can call it, it's about as in your face as it can get. Walk around any show, everyone does predictive maintenance, everyone does AI. When really, I don't want to compare, it's not for me to compare tools, but there's so many different, I'm going to say ice cream flavors of what is called predictive maintenance out there. And it's really, how do you have the time? Who has the time? And to your point as well, the teams are actually using it in the end. Who has the time to actually think about, which tool's the best for my particular situation? Because there's so many different things you need to think about, connectivity and data and, does it scale and what asset types? Does it work in my industry or is it focused on my industry? And all these questions. And
but also like, what's the approach and like, So I bring this back to, I went to a different conference. I don't know if you heard about it. It was the first year they did it, called Prove It Conference, right? A gentleman, Walker Reynolds, out of Texas. He's a systems integrator, built standalone SCADAs, XYZ. He has a good team. Vaughn over there is a really good dude. I appreciated hanging out with him. But they had these sessions where you had to get up and you had to tap into this MQTT namespace, right? Via like HiveMQ, right? This MQTT broker. So all these machine state values were already semantically stored, and all these vendors had to display like live in the moment how they connect into and then what value they drive out. So like, what does an MES do with this data? What does a CMMS do with this data? What does Google Cloud Analytics do with this data? And so many people, again, now you're talking about OT engineers. So you and I, we predominantly talk to reliability groups, maintenance groups. Now you're talking about, this is a group of like OT engineers, which are a little bit more on the process side, right? They're not the same as reliability groups, not the same as the maintenance group, obviously. But then you could also have other groups there that are IT-based organizations, and all of them are trying to do predictive analytics. They're all taking machine state values, running it through a projection model, and saying, oh, we detected that there's a defect present. And they're calling it predictive, right? And really, a lot of times what it is there's no remaining useful life determination with it. And there's no kind of context around it. It's just you've met this threshold that says, hey, you've passed this threshold. I believe something is wrong. So what are we going to do? We're going to scramble and react. We are now reacting to a condition that is present with our equipment. Versus predictive is like, hey, this is starting to trend in the wrong direction. We're giving you a heads up to go do an investigation, maybe do some very in-depth analysis using handheld devices for vibration or ultrasound or oil analysis, right? We're now directing them there to use another PDM technology to really diagnose what's going wrong and how much time we have. Because sometimes with bearings and vibration, there's certain standards around decimals that are found in the vibration. And with ultrasound, like there's how many decimals are found equals how many pumps of grease that you can put into the roller itself, right? And then there's an acceptable level and a non-acceptable level. So it's, to your point, everyone looks at it and says, oh, well, I'm doing predictive maintenance. It's like, are you? Or are you just doing kind of fault-based condition monitoring? And again, you have people selling to maintenance organizations. You have people selling to OT organizations, and you have people selling to IT organizations, all saying they cover this sphere of influence. And maintenance is almost never in the conversation. And that's a problem. The people responsible for managing the assets, keeping the assets in working condition, are not involved in these everyone's trying to solve problems for us, and no one's including us in the conversation.
So what? Yeah. So why is that? Why are they not being included? Is there
we're seen as a cost center?
Yeah.
We're this kind of group of ragtag old heads that are resistant to change. We're not tech savvy. We're knuckle draggers. Like, we show up and fix things. That's our job. And again, that's in my circles. We are starting to take more and more issue with the use in the term of maintenance as all encompassing for all functions of repair, maintenance, and overhauls. Like, typically you're either maintaining or you're repairing, right? If you think about it, if I'm reacting to something, that is now reactive. That is a domain. It means it is now to a point I have designated as functional failure, not catastrophic failure, functional failure. It no longer performs its intended function under stated conditions. Everything before that, I'm still in this proactive window where, yes, it's a degraded performance, but I can act before it fails to function as intended. And I can restore it back to base condition. So, like, I don't know, it's this necessary evil, if you will, in the eyes of a lot of manufacturers. I think it has to do with where they place maintenance in the org chart. In a lot of our industries that we commonly share, you'll see maintenance placed underneath of operations.
Mm.
Other organizations, you'll see maintenance and EH&S and quality kind of in their own little side team. And then obviously the reliability group generally has a direct line to the plant manager or a corporate function, right? They're not they're not stacked underneath of operations. And the reason being, yes, maintenance is always going to be support for operations. The issue I have with that org chart though is operations is always focused. They have a goal, right? They are supporting the business and producing a number of components or objects or whatever we sell. And they have a daily goal to hit. And their maniacal focus is to hit that daily goal. They generally are not thinking about the long term, or at least not the production team itself. So that cascades into maintenance as a support function for production, means you need to drop everything you're doing and sacrifice long-term needs for today's wants. And that's where, an older quote would be, show me how I'm measured and I'll show you how I perform. So maintenance falling underneath of operations, just keep things working today. I don't care how many times we have to band-aid it, right? Technology side, we talk about tech debt, right? How many things we don't fully build out before we release it in a software. That accumulates over time, known as tech debt. You have the same thing with maintenance debt. You just don't know it, and no one has a way of measuring it. And that's the issue of maintenance being under operations. I can promise you, you have much greater maintenance debt in that org chart.
You know what? I can actually resonate with this as a marketing person, because certain if you work for certain organizations or B2B organizations, there's a myth that marketing is just a cost center, right? So is there to support other functions. So it's not there as its own revenue driver, or how I feel it should be positioned. So I sort of see the comparisons there. That unfortunately, I've worked for a lot of companies, including Siemens, where it's treated a lot more, as that revenue driver. But that's where I see the comparison, where I can feel the pain, let's say.
So being siloed underneath the production, everyone's focus is on how do we support production. So whether it's IT or it's OT or reliability, that's where all these groups they have this idea, and it's a great idea. This technology has a great application. I'm just asking, can you include maintenance? I don't care if it's coming from the IT side. I don't care if it's coming from OT or if it's from the reliability group. And this is actually a call to action for everyone listening, is have these relationships. If you have a reliability group, I know you have an IT organization, I know you have an OT organization, and you have a maintenance team. Build a cross-functional team between those four, foster those relationships so maintenance is included in this conversation. So they can bounce these ideas. So when IT is like, hey guys, I saw this thing that AWS is rolling out soon, and because we use AWS, OT, what do you think about this? Reliability, what do you think about this? And maintenance, can you get me some data on this from your CMMS? Right? And then that's how you kind of remove that stigma of a cost center, because now you're adding value to the organization and its long-term objectives.
Yeah. So I like you finished with a call to action there before I'd said we'd finish. So that's you're preempting it. No, you're right. You're right, because I think we've covered it very, very well today. I know we sort of went, if we look at what we were going to discuss today, we've sort of gone off on tangents, but then that's they're my favorite podcasts, right? That's what I love. So if we want to sort of tie this together a little bit, so in terms of overcoming those challenges of bringing CMMS and predictive maintenance together, and what would your sort of, I know it depends completely on where an organisation is, and we've talked about a lot of that today, where how different it could be. But if a company's looking to bring the two together or implement two sequentially or at the same time, or one after the other, how would you sort of recommend approaching that from a high level?
You may not like my theory on this. I say the CMMS is foundational. We've talked about this a bit now within Siemens. Is the CMMS is, relative to most of our projects in the DI space, the CMMS is a pretty low hanging fruit. right? You think about it, we're typically selling into brownfield operations. So people who are currently running their facility, they're having maintenance breakdowns, they're having rooftop unit breakdowns, right? All of this. And their facilities team and then their production equipment maintenance team, they're using two different applications, right? They don't talk to each other. They're not sharing this information. There's no process really in place. We just kind of do what we've always done, and it's not formal. I say start with the CMMS, right? I don't even actually, let me back up. When we're talking about technology, I still say start with the CMMS, but even before that, start with just the basics. Start with building a team. Have that team, with a mission, vision, and values. Make sure it's relatable to them. Build the right team and culture, and then master the basics. Get really good at precision maintenance, right? If you look at the PF curve or the DIPF curve, you'll generally see like this run to fail, reactive, proactive, predictive, and then precision maintenance sphere. That I have opinions on that. I'll back off from that. But precision maintenance should just be basic maintenance. It should just be how we perform maintenance. It's doing things at a high degree or high reliability level where if I change a pillow block bearing, I'm ensuring it's the right bearing, it's installed correctly, it is torqued to the right specification. If I need to grease it, I did the right amount of lubricants, I used the right amount of lubricants, and I ensured that the shaft that feeds through it isn't scored or damaged or bent or everything, right? So it's doing it well, making sure that while I'm here, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to do it right the first time, right? That's precision maintenance. That should be the basics. Or else you're introducing defects, and those defects now we're catching with predictive technologies. And it's like, that's great, but if I never fix how I do the maintenance in the first place, I mean, it keeps predictive technology providers in business. I'll say that. It may even keep the CMMS providers in place, but you're not delivering value for the organization. And then we're seen as a cost center. So we have to get out of our own way. We got to master the basics of how we perform maintenance, how we manage maintenance, work order management, planning and scheduling, your asset history, your inventory management. The CMMS helps that tremendously. It doesn't fix it. It only amplifies bad processes. I think once you get the process done right, then you move on to a CMMS. Shortly after, you identify, hey, we now have done an appropriate asset criticality analysis. We understand which assets are most critical to our operations. We understand the demand on those assets. We have, many shutdowns scheduled on a reoccurring basis. But through an RCM mentality, we've also said, hey, there is a risk present between shutdowns, scheduled shutdowns for failure of this critical equipment. These are the failure modes that potentially can happen. These are the effects of those failure modes. And here are my prevention strategies. One of those prevention strategies is a predictive technology solution. And again, it doesn't have to be wireless sensors and gateways kind of hooked up everywhere, taxing your network. The OT side is probably already looking at automating that process. So they may be using Siemens PLCs, Siemens motion controllers, Siemens VFDs, right? Cool. Guess what? Those have outputs. You can connect in, I know via your tool, you can consume those outputs and those machine state parameters without having to retrofit and IoT up your environment. And then now you connect your Senseye to your Brightly Asset Essentials. Your case alerts generate work orders. I notify you back what was done with the context, which trains your attention engine. And then I keep the asset lifecycle information in one place. So now at the end of the year, when it comes for the capital planning situation, I can help them identify what assets, where did they spend money, but also same place as their facilities equipment data of, hey, we're having a heat wave right here. I don't know about y'all in the UK. We're having a heat wave. HVAC units are just crap in the bed everywhere because they've been under that maintenance debt window for a long time. And now people are going to prioritize it on their capital planning season, and they're going to neglect some of their production assets. So again, why have two different solutions when one could potentially help with it all, not just one solution and ecosystem? right? A predictive technology coupled with your CMMS, which speaks to a capital planning solution potentially, if all of the processes are ready to take advantage of those solutions.
No, fantastic.
So start with precision maintenance. It starts with education. It starts with team building and relationships, and then it's precision maintenance. Because if you don't do it precisely, you're going to do it again and again and again.
Yeah, that old saying, don't run before you can walk. Yeah, sort of comes into play.
We like to say crawl, walk, run. So again, feel free to do that.
Fantastic. And but yeah, no, I think that's really great. Corey, we are out of time today, but again, there's so many other topics we can spin out of this, so I'm sure it won't be long before I'll be inviting you back for future episodes and discussions. So we won't leave it as long next time, I promise.
That works for me. I'll try and manage the what do you call it? Not tangents, but the blowouts that I had. The long tangents.
I love the tangents. Yeah, we love tangents on Trend Detection podcast.
It's very predictable that I'll go on a tangent. So,
yeah, exactly. But no, for today, Corey, thank you very much for spending your time sharing your expertise with the audience. And thank you, everyone, for listening wherever you are. And see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.